Hi, my name is Colton and I work here at Colbert Botanical Gardens. I'm here with the Conservatory team and we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about houseplants and what to expect this winter. So we're here actually in the tropical greenhouses, and this is the tropical house that supports the Bowles Conservatory. So please drop any comments or questions you have in the comments of this post, and we'll try to answer them as we go through. But otherwise, we've pulled some different examples of things you might expect, but I'll let the rest of my team here introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, Terry Hodge here, orchid horticulturist here at Colbert Botanical Gardens.
Irene Hadlin, assistant to the conservatory and production needs here.
Great, yeah, so I pulled a bunch of different plants here that I'm going to talk about as far as pests and sort of things you can expect when bringing or overwintering plants, and even just as far as your house plants go, what you might expect. So one of the big things is that we have a lot less light, and that's one of the big things that we see, even here in the conservatory. The light quality is a lot lower, and you'll see a lot of leaf drop. A lot of yellowing leaves. New growth on plants is going to be slower.
Spindly.
And spindly, yeah. You're going to have elongated nodes between leaves. You're going to have, we've got some Ficus elastica here. So both of these plants have been growing in different areas. This plant has been growing in an area that has lower light. So you can see its new growth is a lot lighter. And so this is what you might expect from your house plants now that the light quality is a lot lower. And here's one that's been in the greenhouse, and you can see it has that nice red still in the leaf. But this isn't to say this is nothing to worry about. You might be going, oh gosh, what's going on? And that's just totally normal for these winter conditions. And also you'll see here we've got a philodendron. A lot of times you just start getting yellowing leaves, and this is just because these leaves are older. So we'll just it's just as simple as pulling those off. But a lot of times I get people asking me oh, there's yellowing leaves on my plant, what am I doing wrong? But that can be a sort of sign of overwatering.
It can be a sign of overwatering, and it can be a sign of dry air. But if it's just the lower leaves, typically one or two lower leaves, those are typically the oldest leaves on the plant, and you just, move them away, and it's beautiful again. But if you're seeing,
come on.
But if you're seeing a lot of leaves, it could be a sign of some environmental condition. But it's true that with the lowering light, just interior leaves will drop, even moving a location, it'll drop. Mm-hmm. Being in front of a draft or a heat vent can be a problem. But
yeah, so here I've got, this is a Plectranthus that we did cuttings of and have been growing on. And here's one that I've just simply overwatered. So, now it's going through sort of plant collapse. And this can also sort of look like what you might expect. It kind of looks like it's too dry. So a lot of times you have sort of the same symptoms with whether you're overwatering or underwatering. But in winter, you're going to find it's really hard to underwater your plants. And then, sometimes a lot of people get used to a sort of a watering schedule through summer, where they're finding that they're watering more often, and then winter comes and they're giving their plants just as much water, and then sometimes you'll find that you get fungus gnats. And even that's something we deal with here in the greenhouses. But a simple way we even just kind of monitor with that is putting up these yellow sticky cards. These are something you can just pick up at online, or sort of a greenhouse supply store I think would have them. And we always just sort of write the date on them, and then you can just sort of use them to sort of identify what kind of pests you might have. and like sort of the volume and like in that time frame. So, you know, these were set out just a couple days ago, and we've already got some like fungus, some different like bugs on there.
Yellow sticky cards are also a great mechanical control. Like for fungus gnat, you're really just collecting them and removing the pest without having to do anything else. And it is a sign of soil that's too wet because they breed in the soil. So that can especially happen in the wintertime. And it means you do want to let stuff dry down more between waterings if you can.
Yeah, so if you can let that soil go totally dry, not to the point where your plant is like wilting and like flagging, but you want it to go as dry as possible because that is like that sort of breeding area for those. And then I've got a couple other pests here. Like this is where, this is just a branch of from our coffee plant, but you can sort of see that white cottony is mealybug. And so actually that is the underside of the plant. So you really want to make sure you're giving your, looking on the underside of leaves, sort of looking in like little crevices, because that's where you'll start to see these pest populations sort of pop up. So we've like mechanically just like removed some of these branches, like just prune them off. If you want to avoid, like a pesticide, you can use like isopropyl alcohol or just like sort of rub down like with cotton swab and alcohol. You can just wipe your foliage and clean it from, clean the pests off. Some people use like soapy water and lemon juice.
Neem oil or horticultural oil, if it's not a thin-leaved or hairy-leaved plant, will also work to smother. But oil's kind of messy inside, so I think it's better to just like, but you could, again, like put it on a cloth and wipe. You've only got a couple plants. It's not too bad.
And like because mealybugs like are a sucker, so they're like sucking from your plant. Sometimes you'll see those results of like sooty mold, and you'll see sort of like droppings on the top of leaves, like a sort of sticky residue, and then that's like where the sooty mold comes from. Also, I've got all sorts of pests in here. This plant we have some brown scale on, so this is another sucking plant. They kind of just, you'll find these on like stems. We mostly find them on the stems, but you can find them on the undersides of leaves as well. That's another one you can just physically remove.
And the stippled foliage, this sort of mottled pattern, is something to watch for. If you're like, oh, it's a yellow leaf, but it's a little funky, like that's sometimes a sign. A lot of these sucking insects will make this sort of pattern on the leaves, and then it's time to flip it over and see what's under the hood kind of thing. So.
And here we've got aphids. So here you can see, that's like sort of one, you almost see those like white casing, that's like the juvenile, what do you call that? Like exoskeleton or instar that they shed. But you can see they love like new growth. You'll find them usually if you have like new growth on something. That's some of the first places you can see that.
But if it's aphid, that can just go in the shower and get like literally washed off. Like spider mite or aphid, it's kind of nice if it, you can really just kind of blast them off. Because they're just small, soft bodied.
Yeah, if you got like that hose attachment on your sink, like that's a good candidate for spraying them down. So yeah, so like, and another thing to think of is like a lot of house plants are actually like tropical plants. Like I know that's not necessarily true for succulents and cacti and some other different types of house plants. But you want to try to kind of keep that in mind through winter, and like, so really like light levels are a lot lower, and we're also dealing with like humidity levels that are a lot lower. So yeah, so there are like different ways you can combat humidity, and I think Irene's got something over here.
I do have something to show you, which is if you have, like, in general, those tropical understory plants want higher humidity than we have when we're heating the air inside, it's really dry inside. I mean, my skin is, don't get a close-up, please. It's cracking on me. So anyways, there's a couple ways to do it. You can actually run a humidifier. You can group your plants in the kitchen if you have a bright spot, or the bathroom, or you can raise the relative humidity very simply by making a humidity tray. So I brought a really ugly old utilitarian one here with a grid, and you would just put water in the bottom and place your plants on top so they're not sitting in the water. Or you can make it a little prettier with some stones and like a plate, a glazed saucer, and again, I didn't drink water, but this is for thin-leafed plants, ferns, begonia, which wants high humidity but doesn't actually want water on the leaves. So stuff like that, you would just group them together. And that actually is another trick, because actually just grouping the plants together raises the ambient humidity. They're actually helping each other stay more humid by transpiring, you know, doing their photosynthesis. So I also brought this Apicia over here. Apicia? This is a gesneriid. So like, this is a good example of a plant, like if you have African violet, a plant that's got this like hairy leaf, wants high humidity, but if you actually like came and misted this, you might cause rotting issues. They don't want water sitting on the leaves. So that's one little tip. And then the other thing is make sure that your plants aren't in front of a heat vent or by a draft, and then a shower once in a while. They appreciate that.
Clean those leaves off, get the dust off of them.
Yeah, some people are really into misting, and it doesn't like raise the humidity for very long, but it does get the dust off, and then it's more efficient to capture the light that it can and get through the winter.
Yeah, and talking about like humidity and sort of like creating that, I pulled some poinsettias. We all know like the holidays are coming, and so these are, you know, a big staple. People buy these a lot. And these are even some of the ones we'll have here displayed in the conservatory or in the gift shop. But a big thing with these is they don't want to be sitting in water. So, you know, like those humidity trays are a good example of like keeping plants above water, but still giving them that humidity. Whereas like a lot of time you see these coming in those foil packs, those foil slips. And you really want to make sure that you're like letting these go like completely dry before rewatering. And then like also if you're watering them, to kind of take them out of those foil slips or where you have them, and let the water drain through.
Or you could slash the bottoms of them. Yeah. And then let it drain into a saucer and dump it up. It shouldn't sit in the drainage water. No plant is happy sitting in drainage water unless it's actually a bog plant. There are some, you know, if you have a cypress or...
Yeah, you could have boggy plants, I suppose. And then, let's see, what else do I got over here? Well, and then, you know, like with winter, here's a plant that, you know, we actually just experienced some cold damage in shipping. So you'll see, so sometimes, you know, like we got a little nice bit of warm weather here, but if you're noticing some of this cold damage on your plants, like they're not dead, you can just sort of like remove, well, hopefully they're not dead. Hopefully you got them in before it got too cold. But they'll be pushing new growth, and then that will just kind of remove.
But if you end up getting a plant, make sure it does have some sort of wrapping on it. Like if you are out and about and decide to bring home a plant, like if you're wearing a coat, your plant needs a coat. Well, for the most part, like 40 degrees and above. And like poinsettias, really, they want it, like some of these tropicals, they want it above 50. So it's really good to like get them home and just keep them warm so you don't end up seeing cold damage. And that can also happen against a cold window too. So like you're like, oh yeah, I'm giving them all the light, and it's like up against single pane glass, and you're like, what's going on? This one side is, you know, that could happen too. So depending on what it is, like a cactus would love it.
All right, let's go over to the orchids. So they touched on a lot of good things in terms of preparing your plants for winter. So it's just a good time to check in on your habits, watering and things like that, and also pests. The cool thing about winter and the cooler temperatures is that it's an exciting time for orchid growers. That cooler temperature actually initiates a lot of flowering in orchids. And so one of the questions that I often get is, how do I cut the spike on my orchid? And so I wanted to just give a quick demonstration of that today, because some of you probably have orchids that are flowering now, or they're going to soon, and so in a few weeks you'll probably need to figure out how to cut the spike. So 2 orchids that I have here today, both of these are Phalaenopsis orchids from the collection. You can see that the spikes here no longer have flowers on them, so they're perfect candidates to have the spikes removed. So there's 2 different things you can do. You could remove the spike all the way down to the base, which is a perfectly fine option. Or you could try to have it flower a second time in a few months by cutting more in the middle. So I guess I'm just going to show you all how I do that here. In the greenhouse, in the collection, I always use a single-use razor blade just because it's sterile. Orchids are prone to virus and other diseases, so it's always good to just have something sterile for cutting. So a single-use razor blade, we recycle these after we're done. Or if you're at home, you'll most likely have scissors. So I also do this sometimes, but you just want to take the flame and sterilize these.
Pyrotechnics.
You want to do it probably like 15 to 20 seconds. The longer the better. You really want it to heat up so that it's killing any pathogens. And so, for example, on this one here, I'm going to cut it at the base. And what that means is I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the plant, and there's a small little bump here, and that actually bumps all along up this stem. But I'm going to start down here at the bottom, what's called a node, and I'm going to just trim it right above that. So now this spike is gone, and that's perfectly fine. That plant will continue to grow. This spike here, this little piece might dry down a little bit, and that's fine. Once it dries all the way down, you could remove it if it's unsightly to you, but this is perfectly fine. Now, between plants, you definitely want to sterilize, so I'm going to go ahead and flame this again.
At home, I think squirting with I even actually use hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I don't have isopropyl alcohol on hand, but I have hand sanitizer, so
Yeah.
I don't know that it's as good, like as far as,
Right, but it's, do something.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing.
Some sort of sanitation.
Some sort of sanitation, exactly. So on this one, I'm actually going to cut it about 3 or 4 nodes up to try to give it a chance to flower again. And when I'm talking about nodes, I'm talking about these little swollen parts of this flower spike. So there's one down here, there's one here, and then on up. So what I'm going to do for this is actually count about 3 or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to cut this one right here, right above that swollen spot, just like that. Now, maybe it will work, maybe it won't, but this plant might produce a second flower spike right out of this node here. So if your plant's healthy and you've grown it well, it just might do that. So for home growers, that's often a fun thing to do just because you get more flowers.
super.
Exactly. I don't
Well,
know if you
what if you're like me, who's a bad orchid grower at home and neglects them, and so like I have a zygo at home, and all the new growth is just really like thin and pale. Like, is it better to just remove that and hope that it will grow in spring, or am I sort of just a lost cause?
Well, it kind of depends. It'd be cool to see a picture of it, but if you have sort of like weak growth and it just looks kind of funky, it's complicated with orchids because they kind of only grow forward, and so if you remove all that new growth, it's tough to say. You
I
could
wouldn't
try.
remove it now. I would wait till spring.
Yeah.
Because it needs to make food.
Exactly.
Even if it is unsightly to you.
Right, like I'm hesitant
If it's
to say
unsightly and
remove
you
it.
hate it, then it's time for the compost bin.
Yeah, like if it's not diseased or anything,
Yeah.
I would say probably leave it until there's a better chance for the orchid to recover.
So there's a good point. Just hang on to them. Just hold on to them. But if you hate it, get rid of it.
Well, I mean, for a Phalaenopsis, you're going to get months of bloom time out of it. If you brought a bouquet home, you pitch it in the compost in a week and not feel bad. So it really depends on like what your goal is with the plant. You know, I have sentimental plants that look terrible, but I've kept
Right.
Yeah.
beyond suffering, you know, yes, because, you know.
It's like, just wait till these babies go in the conservatory, you won't even recognize them.
But learn what the plant is too, because there are plants that go completely dormant. And like, you know, it's supposed to be doing that. And if you don't know that, then you think it's daunting. Any questions filtering in? Not a one.
Not a one, right?
September said, wow, that rock humidity tray is so cool.
I think so, yeah. It's like a way to just have some fun. Can double pot too. But I haven't done that a lot to like increase humidity. I do have my one orchid at home is double potted.
Well, yeah.
And that was incidental, which means like it's a pot and then it's inside of another pot and then there's like moss in between as a way to raise the humidity. And it loves it in there. And it was kind of incidental, I just didn't have mix to repot. But it was like growing, so I was like, oh, it'll like kind of anchor it for a while. And it's really happy in there. And then later I was like, oh, people are really into this double potting to increase humidity.
Yeah, and some like some of the orchids that like prefer a winter blooming time, we also have some things like amaryllis, which a lot of people will grow or force for the holidays. And so, you know, these are a bulb that you can either plant or you can plant them if you want to try to grow them on after, or you can really just like, you know, put them in a sort of bright spot and they'll force up their flowers without any water or media around the bulb. Like sometimes you can even find them like dipped in wax or and other like decorative.
You're getting creative with it. Or there's these cool vases where like you plant, or you can do it in a hurricane or something at home and you kind of prop it up. And typically you do have water, but it's not touching the bulb, like it's in stones and it senses the water, so it like sends roots down into it. And that will help it bloom. But I have seen them where like they're just like blooming without anything at all, like these waxy ones, which is weird. But cool, they look like ornaments or something, so it's kind of fun. Yeah, I love amaryllis because I love having something to bloom in the middle of winter. So I do grow them every year so that in February there's something blooming. They like a bright spot, they like it warm. Don't need the humidity, but they do need a bright spot. And to actually dry down between waterings. And I don't know if you can see, but there's little we do have fungus gnats. Like they're like hopping around there. There's like a tube.
Yeah, we've got them. Even we have them here in the, let's see.
But this is what's, it's just starting to grow. So like if you buy the bulb, you pot it up, you want the shoulders out, like you don't want to plant it too deeply. Mm-hmm. And you water it once, and then you wait, you put it somewhere sunny, and hopefully warm, and then you wait, and then once it starts to put its flower stalk out, you start watering more regularly to let it spike.
And yeah, so like, should you buy a Dutch bulb? What kind of bulb should you buy if you wanted to bloom, you know?
So if you want it to bloom for the holidays, you should ask, and hopefully, or look it up online. The ones that are grown in South Africa will bloom in time for like November, December. And the ones that are Dutch grown will typically bloom later. When we're talking about like the big flowered, typical amaryllis that you're thinking of. They're all actually South American bulbs. They thought they were from South Africa, but they're South American. And, or you can get the little ones. They tend to have smaller bulbs that are like butterflies one. It's called Papilio or Sylvester. And those have, or spider amaryllis I sometimes call them, and they have like kind of these thinner petals instead of the big showy flowers. They're more like spidery. And those will definitely bloom earlier. But when like the ones I have at home, I don't expect them to bloom in December because I grow them out over the summer and then I throw them in the basement and let them dry down for 2 months and then bring them out and wake them up in a warm spot, and then yeah, it takes them about 2 months to bloom time. So on the normal cycle of things, like yeah, threw them in the garage in October, made sure they didn't freeze out there, got them down in the basement. But they're lovely. They like getting around us.
So yeah, do your research, kind of figure out like,
What do you have?
yeah, what do you have? What does it take? Like, you know, and that's where a lot of people with orchids say like, oh man, I never got this Phalaenopsis to rebloom. And it could simply just be like leaving your windows open in the fall, or kind of giving it that cold period. So, yeah.
Yeah, for Phalaenopsis, I guess we could talk a little bit about that. To get the flower spike to come up on a Phalaenopsis orchid, to rebloom it, you need to have a number of weeks where the night temperatures are down into like the mid to upper 50s. That cooler temperature really initiates that spike. So if you're growing them warm in your house or sort of at a constant temperature, that is going to sort of prevent the flower spike from happening. Light is another big thing, but temperature is important as well.
So we do have a question here. Alexandra said, when one of my houseplants has a leaf that's dying, for example my Marantha red veins, should I cut it off or leave it alone until it's shriveled up? I have heard that if you leave it alone, the rest of the plant will spend energy trying to save it. I've also heard that when a leaf dies, the plant saps the energy from that leaf to help the rest of the plant prosper. So I'm not sure what to think.
I would remove it unless it's like there's only 3 leaves on the plant, then I would leave it. Like if it's suffering, we kind of talked about this a little, like if it's suffering and there's only a couple leaves on the plant, like let it finish before you trim it off. But at some point you'll trim it off because it is already senescing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think, you know, like we have aging leaves on plants, and but that does bring up a thing is like usually if you're leaving, I would say take it off as well, because sometimes when you leave like aging or kind of sick leaves on a plant, you're just opening that up as a vector for like pests and like sort of disease and stuff. So like that does bring up a good point about like you do want to keep your plants clean.
Yeah.
Going from fall into winter, plants that I pull in personally at home, like I'll even thin out some of the canopy of them or like the interior of them, like already anticipating that they're already slowing down for winter. That you're like, you know, you're going to lose leaves on them. So like even just by preemptively thinning them some, you're kind of like getting a head start on that.
I will say though, if it's Marantha and it's like tip burn though, to just be careful about using like cold water out of the sink, because they're really kind of notorious for hating our water, and especially that it's fluoridated, which it does, like when I water my plants at home, I put it out in a watering can and just let it come up to room temperature, and then like the chlorine off gases off of it, and it's tempered, and that's what I use for fussier plants, not everything, but like I try to just routinely do that. And I would definitely do that, like don't blast it with cold water. Don't ever use softened water, which would be warm water. And yeah, just to watch out for that, because I know for sure like all the calatheas, that whole family is thin-leaved and needs humidity. Also, yeah.
All right, so that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you for tuning in. Next month we will be filming this Garden Gab with our development team, and they'll have something for you guys then. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.